During the pandemic lockdowns, many of us were surprised to see empty shelves in supermarkets and supply shortages. Rather than rushing out and hoarding toilet paper, a group of young people saw this as an opportunity to provide for the vulnerable in their community and for a rethink in how public space is used.
Around that time, there was an overwhelming sense of despair within the community. And I think what we decided to do was to try and create something that would give people hope.
Ruby Thorburn has lived in Brisbane's riverside suburb of West End for 3 years. During the pandemic, she shared her concerns with friend Al Wicks.
And we've always had like a dream of trying to create like change within our community and, you know, give back to our community. So at the start of the pandemic, we were really worried about how, you know, the global pandemic was going to impact upon local food systems.
In March 2020, Al and Ruby teamed up to convert thought into action. They formed Growing Forward, a community organisation dedicated to setting up Guerilla Gardens in underutilised public space.
So we've got our passion fruit vine, Jerry. It's got some fruits going there. And also our beautiful pawpaw tree as well.
It's looking great. You've got yak on.
We've got yak on. It's like you eat the root, so it's like a sweet potato kind of thing. And we've got our sweet potato vine. It grows like a weed. It's so good, and you can eat the leaves, which is great. We've got our chilies down here, and our beautiful cosmos, which is so good for the bees.
Stacks of pumpkin.
Yeah, and we've got a little pumpkin growing here as well, which is great to see. Yeah, and more chilies just over here, and also our okra.
This is gorgeous.
Yeah. So this is probably like one of our bigger ones. You can see that's like flowering as well, which is really beautiful. And there's a few growing here that we'll probably harvest sometime today.
Your star okra.
Yes, our star okra.
Everything looks so healthy. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't spray, and yet, and I can see there are grasshoppers here, but you've managed to avoid a lot of damage. Considering you have a garden with no rules, you're all applying the rules really well. This garden is in vibrant West End, in inner South Brisbane. It occupies around 1,000 square metres, and in it grow at least 60 different food plants, all growing in raised beds. It's been a remarkable success.
We used to do walks around this area. We used to come past this abandoned plot. It's been abandoned for years, and we were just like, oh, it just like clicked to us that we were like, oh, maybe we should just start growing food here.
Leaning on Ruby's permaculture background and Al's love of veggie gardening, they conducted a site assessment and identified a water supply and a promising full sun aspect.
We spoke to some of the traditional owners of the land and asked them for their consent to start this garden. And then we went on and flyered the community, put up a big sign that said, we're starting a Guerilla Garden in 1 week. If you have a problem, call this number. And we went out and we spoke to some people and made sure that the people in this apartment block particularly were on board and okay with it. And then a week later we started. This garden cost about $2,000 to establish. We set up the garden in about a day and a half. We had a team of 4 people. We came in, we laid the cardboard out, and then we laid about 30 centimetres of wood chip mulch, and then we got some soil delivered and we just set up all the beds.
While a lot of effort went into the setup, there's no permanent infrastructure, which helps to avoid the ire of state government.
We've been trying to keep the gardens as simple as possible so that people can replicate them, but also so that we can do them and get away with them. So a part of it is to avoid overcomplicating the gardens or by adding things that aren't necessary that the state government might have an issue with.
The produce is grown for refugees living in the community, so Al and Ruby asked them what they would like to eat.
Some of the foods that the guys requested was okra is the main thing, because they requested that a lot in detention because they were fed awful food. So okra, King Kong spinach, cassava.
Given the success of West End, Al and Ruby established a second garden here at Kangaroo Point, another inner-city Brisbane suburb. How do you decide what is grown here?
We want these gardens to be for everyone, for the community. So we just encourage people to come and plant whatever seeds or plants they want. And it's kind of just determined by what's in season.
You've had a really big turnout for your working bee. Is this normal?
Yeah, I think so. We usually get more people in the working bees when we say it's a potluck as well. So that's when we get all the people, because like people are like, oh yay, free food as well. So sometimes we make food from the garden, like a salad, and after the working bee, we eat as well.
There's no doubt that Growing Forward is becoming a really significant movement, regularly supplying food to community organisations and those most vulnerable, as well as building local connections. So Growing Forward is still growing.
Indeed it is. It's still growing. We're hoping to do another 4 plots this year. So we've got a couple more plots in mind in Brisbane and 1 in Logan. So we're hoping to go out, do some site assessments and establish a few more gardens.
So turning it, that'll make it speed up a bit.
The pandemic shattered the illusion of abundant, reliable supermarket food provided by corporations. Community responses like this are not only appropriate for feeding those who need it most during the direst of times, but also because they are nimble and quick in response to sudden change. Plus, they're bringing people together. They're building connections and friendships which will endure long after the supply crisis. And the community is stronger and better fed as a result.
The whole point of the gardens is to build community capacity and resilience so that when the next crisis hits, whether that be, climate-induced and our agriculture systems are failing, we know how to set up a garden within a day and a half, and we know how to grow food and feed ourselves. And while we're doing that, we also feel connected to a community as well, where we can look after each other. And, that's like the aim of Growing Forward. It's not just about, growing food, it's also about like community building.
For me, something really special about the gardens is that every time I come, I hear the sound of laughter. And I think laughter means more than laughter. It means that we're connected to something. And so whenever we're in the garden, as soon as we hear the sound of laughter, it's a sign that things are going well and that the project's kind of achieved what it was set out to achieve.